Hi, my name is Julia Evers. I am a flutist and a teacher. So let's get into it. This is the Flute TMEA Etude in E major. So it's vivacissimo. So it's very light and spirited, full of fun and character. So whenever I imagine playing this piece, I don't imagine it being very heavy. I imagine it being very light, very easygoing, okay? Even though the notes are not as easygoing, okay? So let's talk about working through this etude. There's a lot of weird jumps, weird intervals, and many accidentals. It doesn't necessarily just stay in the key of E major, okay? I recommend finding the patterns in this piece. There's a lot of them. For example, measures like 11, 12, 13, 14, 19, 20, pretty much almost throughout the whole piece, there's some sort of pattern going on, okay? So find those patterns, figure out what it is, and work on that. Here's a hint. There's a lot of augmented fourths or diminished fifths in this piece. Another thing that's important to note in this etude is seeing how the notes are grouped, specifically their little bar lines, right? They're not always evenly put into 4 notes in a group. They're not always like that. There's like right at the beginning, 3 notes grouped together, a 16th note by itself, another 3 notes, and then another single 16th note leading into a group of 4 16th notes. So things are not always grouped evenly in this etude. So take note of that. You've got groups of 3, 4, 2, and then in some cases it kind of feels like 5 just because of the way that pickup notes are leading into the next bar line. Next measure, I should say. And then it's also kind of interesting to note how some of the way that some of the notes are grouped, they're across bar lines. Like, for example, at the end, 36, 37, 38, 39, there are a few instances where the notes are grouped across the bar line. So that kind of affects, I guess, how you should think about playing this piece, kind of the rhythm of this piece. I'm not saying that the rhythm changes. There are 16th notes throughout the whole way. Don't change the rhythm. It is an even 16th note throughout the whole etude. But make note of how these notes are grouped, thinking where maybe the emphasis on the beginning of these groups are and how that plays a role when you play this piece. I really suggest using a very light articulation, a very light tongue stroke for this piece. It's meant to be really like fast and kind of sparkling, so there's no place for a heavy downtrodden tongue. No place for it, okay? So make sure that you use like just a very light articulation. There should be more tone than tongue. I suggest feeling as if you're playing with a legato tongue, but it's not legato at all. So to kind of clarify that, if I play with a very light, smooth legato tongue, the tongue is very light, my tongue is not working hard at all. So use that type of articulation, but just make the notes a little bit shorter. And then that will naturally make the piece a little bit more open and lively, and just it won't sound as heavy. But there is a few places where it says molto agudo or aguzo, and that means very super pointed, really sharp, really short. So in those places, I would say to use your articulation a little bit more to really make a note that this place is supposed to be very. But again, don't do it in such a way that the tone and the sound suffers, okay? It's only for like 2 measures or so that you would do this type of articulation and then go back to your very light, normal articulation. There's a lot of intervals in this piece. They jump around from low to high, high to low. They're all over the place. So how I would recommend practicing your intervals, First, you need to make sure that your air is doing what it needs to do, okay? So the air speed and the air direction and the amount of air, they all play a factor. So going from low to high, your air direction needs to go up higher. Your air speed needs to be a little bit faster, okay? And you might need to use a little bit more air just to make sure that the air gets all the way up there, so that the note can come out, okay? Another way that you can practice this is by using harmonics. For example, measure 9, going up to that high F sharp. You can practice your harmonics. Using your harmonics is a good test to see if your air is doing what it needs to do for those notes. So I'll be playing harmonics. A harmonic, I'll be playing a low D sharp for the D sharp, and then a low D to play a harmonic A, and then an F sharp to play the high F sharp. That's one way that you can practice your intervals, is by figuring out the harmonic fingerings and practicing with harmonics. Faster does not necessarily mean better. If you can play it fast and the articulation is in the place, the notes are good, they're not fumbling over each other, then that is awesome. But just because you're playing it faster does not automatically make it better, okay? If you play it slower and it sounds better and cleaner and the notes are not flopping all over the place, that's automatically gonna sound better. Just playing it slower and cleaner is gonna make it sound better and have a more of an impact than if you were to play it faster and it's just not quite there. It's not as good. So if you want to go faster, you have to start at a slower tempo and work your way up, okay? You have to start slow and work your way up to a faster tempo. Breath marks. These are the places where I would breathe. I mean, there's some obvious places where you can breathe, like where there's like little rests and stuff. Of course, take those breaths if you need to. A very logical breath that I would take would be in measure 16, right after the A sharp. Between the A sharp and the F sharp. I would take that breath between those two, because the F sharp leading into the next measure is kind of like a pickup. It would make more sense to breathe there as a pickup into the next measure and so forth. I guess you could also take a breath right after the A in measure 17, but I personally would not, just because I feel like that would disrupt the pattern and the phrasing right there. Measure 24, right before the high G, I would take a very big breath there, because I wouldn't suggest taking another breath until like 30, 32, 33 or so, until you have a clear rest to take a breath. So I would go from 24 all the way to like 32 or 33 without breathing. But if you absolutely cannot do that, no matter how you try and practice, you can't be able to make those measures in one breath, then I would suggest that you take a breath, 30, counting measures is so hard. Then I suggest that you take a breath at the end of 28, right after the A and between the F double sharp. I would take a breath right there. So that way the F double sharp is the pickup into the next phrase. If you have to take a breath, I would take a breath there, but that would be the only breath that I would take. If you take too many breaths, sometimes it just disrupts the pattern, it disrupts the flow and the fluidity of the piece. So be very careful when you decide, or where you decide to breathe during this etude. So how would you practice these patterns? breaking it down into little pieces. So if you have like a couple of measures or even one measure, if you just break that measure down into little pieces and then kind of slowly string them back up together, then you can get like the whole picture. So let me demonstrate this. We're going to take the last run from the lower register all the way up to the higher register where the high B is at the very end of the piece. You would take it and you would break it down into small little sections and then put the sections back together. So for example, starting at the beginning of 38 on the F sharp, I'm not including the pickup. I'm not including the pickup G sharp. I'm starting on the F sharp for right now. And I'm just going to play those 4 notes because those 4 notes are in a group. Okay? Well, including the first note of the next group. Once that feels a little bit comfortable, move on to the next group, the next 3 notes. From the B to the F sharp. So starting on the first note of the second group to the first note of the third group. Starting on the third group. Next group. And then the last group. Once those individual groups feel comfortable, start stitching them back together. So again, at the beginning, starting on the F sharp, I'll play the first 2 groups together. And then second group and third group together. Third and fourth. And so on and so on. And then you stitch 1, 2, 3 together, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, and so on until you basically have it all put together. Okay, so that's how I would recommend really working on this piece, is just taking things measure by measure in really small chunks and then slowly stitching things back together. So that's my recommendation for working on this piece, getting through these patterns, because these patterns are a roller coaster. Tempo recommendation, again, like I said, I don't think it sounds like the best, like too fast. So I personally don't like it faster than 94, but that's just my personal opinion, okay? Because I like it. I think if it goes a little bit too fast, then it sounds too frenzied and hurried and doesn't sound as nice, but that's my opinion. I hope that these tips and pointers were really helpful for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to message me or let me know. I'm more than happy to help. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.